I'm Hanish Patel, and this is User Friendly, the show where we explore emerging trends in tech, media, and telecom, and how they impact business, operations, and the world around you. Before COVID-19, the average home was already crowded with tech, entertainment, and digital services, all demanding connectivity. With the pandemic forcing work, education, healthcare, and fitness inside as well. Just how much more crowded has the home gotten? And what does this mean for the future? Today, we'll discuss how these changes have altered our daily lives and accelerated demand for a fast evolving suite of connected devices and digital services. Joining me to explore these emerging trends and their impact on the future of connectivity and innovation are Harry Moseley, Chief Information Officer at Zoom Video Communications, and Jana Arbanas, US Telecom Media and Entertainment Leader at Deloitte. Harry, Jana, pleasure to have you on and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Hanish.
Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So again, it'd be remiss of us if I didn't just dive into the pandemic. We're all living, we're all breathing it. And since the onset of it, we've certainly seen a rapid acceleration of certain trends, which in turn have put a spotlight on a number of emerging behaviors. So to open up with, Jana, how have people responded to the sudden need to work and school from home, as well as managing their own health and fitness?
Yeah, I have to say, if somebody would have predicted the scenario in which in-person school and in-person work would have ended on one day and in a few days, almost immediately with the same effectiveness resumed virtually, I literally wouldn't have believed it despite sort of, my awareness of technology. And yet here we are, some would say sort of on the other side of the pandemic, having not only survived the shift to virtual, but really thrived in it, in my opinion, and really took leaps and bounds forward in terms of embracing new digital behaviors. So in my house, I have two boys that were attending third grade and eighth grade. My husband and I quickly filled our days with our virtual meetings for our own jobs. And outside of school and work, we were leveraging smart devices to entertain ourselves and stay connected with family and friends and focused on wellness during the time where we were really all in our homes and sort of locked down, if you will. And I personally know that we were pushing the limits of connectivity in my home, but our recent Connectivity and Mobile Trends survey in 2021 revealed that most consumer households were experiencing the same thing, right? In terms of that forced experiment of working from home. In fact, 55% of US households had someone working from home and 43% had someone schooling from home. And that was at the start of 2021, after a number of months where people inevitably were sort of locked down. So I think, that has been really interesting to see. And then for me in particular, what I thought was fascinating in the survey was a trend around the adoption of telehealth. I think initially sort of our engagement with doctors and medical appointments sort of came to a screeching halt. But eventually, and this was sort of like a forced experiment, our survey found that adults embraced telehealth. Frankly, more than 50% of US adults had virtual doctor visits, and 82% of those who had those visits were satisfied with them, which is a really high satisfaction rate for something that had to be implemented without a lot of preparation or planning, which shows me there's a great potential for this experiment to become a permanent way of life, specifically as it pertains to health. And then finally, I would just say health and fitness. For me, I had spent time out of the home on fitness and attending classes and things like that. And so during the pandemic, I had invested in a connected bike, which enabled me to stream a variety of classes and keep me engaged. And then a connected watch, which tells me, when I've been sitting for too long or being lazy during the day and that I need to stand up. And in fact, our survey found that 58% of US households own a smartwatch or a fitness tracker, and that 14% of them bought those smartwatches during the pandemic. So again, there has a real opportunity for people spending time at home to focus on their fitness and do it in a different way that they maybe hadn't thought that they might enjoy in the past and will likely persist post-pandemic. So, I think those are just a number of examples about the way that our behavior changed and the way that we were all, frankly, able to thrive and achieve continuity relative to school and work and even fitness and health in our home, in our connected home through the use of technology.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Jana, you're absolutely right. We frequently say that everything changed for every company, every industry, every government, every country, everywhere, right? Not only that, it changed, personal lives have changed dramatically. And when I think about myself, I used to be on flights like 3 or 4 flights a week.
Yeah.
A week. In the last 18 months, I've been on 2 flights out to California and back, and not for business. That was just to go see my son. My wife and I went to see our younger son and his fiance. On the fitness side, it's like I used to love playing squash. I gave up playing squash because that was indoors, and my wife and I, we took up tennis. I took up mountain biking and a variety of other things. It's been quite astonishing at how I think our perspective on lives have changed dramatically. I remember sitting back here in March of 2020, reflecting on things, and it's like, I used to be in the office and my kids were still asleep. We're an empty nester now, and it's like I would get home from the office and they'd be asleep again, right? Because I would leave before they got up and I would come home after they went back to bed. And what has transpired over the last 18 months is factual evidence that work life can be different. We have clearly demonstrated that we can work from home very effectively. Be, terrific when our kids are, quote, back in school full time. But it is nice if you have a young family to be able to work from home, not 5 days a week, 2 to 3 days a week, and be able to see your kids off to school in the morning. I think that's refreshing to be able to have breakfast with your kids, take care of an elder in your household, be there when the kids get home from school, make sure they have a snack, do their homework. And I think people are finding that this is very refreshing. One of the things that we've found in talking to many enterprises around the world is become an employee world. It's no longer an employer world. Mm-hmm. Difference being that employees are going to select companies and organizations that offer them great flexibility. So I think, employers need to figure out, well, what does the hybrid work mean to them? How do they implement it? One of our clients said, for the last 18 months, the biggest experiment in work and life has been conducted. It's not over. Hopefully we'll come out of this pandemic in the not too distant future. She said the biggest experiment is going to continue for at least another 12 or 18 months because we only think things now. We don't know things. Right. And it's only once the experiment is over, way after the pandemic, will we actually know things as opposed to thinking things.
It's a great point.
Yeah, it is. And I'm thinking about just what you mentioned there, Harry and Jana, about just some of the changes and the disruption. And of course, there's been a lot of pain and suffering through that, but there's been many positive aspects that have come out that both of you have highlighted. And just thinking, Harry, your company is as one of those companies that have really enabled a lot of those positive things to come out, and the ability to stay connected, be that through work, be that through play, be that through entertainment, all of those aspects. How do you envision the future of work specifically, and for Zoom itself, what does the year ahead really look like?
Clearly, we fundamentally believe it's going to be a hybrid model. Hybrid from a professional perspective, it's going to be hybrid working, it's going to be hybrid events. When you look at events as an example, they used to be all in person. Now they've gone sort of all virtual. And many event organizers recognize that the world is either bigger or smaller, depending on your perspective, because they can, attract a global audience. They can have speakers on a global basis. And so that gives them a completely different sort of platform from where things were before. Employers like Deloitte, as an example, you can be agnostic in terms of geography, not just nationally, you can be global. I was talking to an Irish organization earlier this morning. They can recruit from Britain, they can recruit from all over Europe. And guess what? People don't need to relocate. They can actually stay in country. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we're going to see a lot of this in the future. And we're doing a lot at Zoom to support the hybrid work. We introduced a variety of technologies earlier this year where, we're just launching what we call our Smart Gallery, which is, one of the things that we've experienced over the last 18 months is the fact that ability to be inclusive, the ability to have equality, the ability to collaborate in a virtual world. And the challenge is, how do you maintain that in the hybrid world? How do I maintain exactly what Jana's doing right now, nodding and smiling at me? I like that. Yep. That's positive engagement, right? But if Jana, if you're in a conference room with a couple of other colleagues, how do I engage with you with those nonverbal cues? So Smart Gallery, what it's doing is using artificial intelligence to stream out the faces of the people, so I can still, as a remote participant, engage with you in the same way as I did in the virtual world, although now you're sort of in a conference room, in a Deloitte office somewhere. So we're doing lots of cool things like that. And then you've got sort of the education sector that's also sort of rethinking what's the purpose of the campus. And they can have a bigger audience. They can have students from around the world. They can have lecturers from around the world. They can have guest speakers, etc. And then, you think about healthcare. The notion of having to spend 45 minutes to go from my home to see a specialist in the city because I got some problem with my wrist, and all he tells me to do is like turn my hand up, turn my hand down, twist this way, twist that way. And then he says, okay, I'm going to write you a prescription to go have an x-ray done. It's kind of like, well, that was an hour and a half out of my life. It's of my life. I could have done this over a video. And there's so much capability with smartphone technology. One of our clients is in the business of providing eye surgeons with consultancy services. What is that? So imagine an 8-year-old boy in Malaysia who's totally blind, having his cornea operated on by 2 surgeons locally, obviously, but getting consultant services from a professional in Indiana. I mean, these are sort of real life use cases.
Harry, I'm just thinking about that example you just cited, and often that's one that's often put forward as a real case for 5G going forward in terms of low latency and deep connectivity that can take place across the globe. So just going along that thread of thinking, and both of you have mentioned the different types of services that you can do through connectivity, and we're seeing that, and certainly a lot of devices that are going to need to be connected. Again, be that for an example you just cited there, or for entertainment. And you mentioned smartphone as well. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, both you, Jana and Harry, is how do you see all of that impacting what many would see as the absolute go-to device for anything they do, which is the smartphone?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Again, I'll go back to our survey and just sort of root the conversation in some data. So the average US household now has 25 connected devices. In my house, we have more than that for sure. When I think about laptops, tablets, smartphones, headphones, fitness devices, as I mentioned before, but not to mention that I run my home on my smartphone and some of the connected devices in that way. So the smartphone, to your point, is absolutely at the center of that relative to the apps that control many things in your home and in your life, the apps that you use for entertainment, and then apps, frankly, that you use to order food, purchase things online. The smartphone is at the center, but what we are seeing is more connected devices. And frankly, what was interesting in the survey is that households went from 11 types of devices in 2019 to 14 types of devices. So there is absolutely a differentiation, and people are using specific devices for different things, right? Depending upon what they're trying to achieve. So I do think that element is interesting, and I think it actually comes back to connectivity, right? So if you think about connectivity in your home, that's going to support all of the connected devices and enable you, Hanish, to be able to get on video, even though your kids, right, are streaming shows and playing video games. But then also your connectivity from your smartphone perspective, that's going to enable you to do stuff not only in your home, but when you're out and about. And so connectivity, I think, actually becomes a bigger part of the conversation to support all these technologies that we've all adopted and that we're finding convenience from and efficiency from. We're starting, I think, to feel the strain of that on our current sort of technology and the connectivity that we have today. And that's why I think the 5G conversation becomes really interesting relative to connectivity in your home and connectivity for your device. I don't know, Harry, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're 200% right. It's all about connectivity. I can have great apps and, if I haven't got a great connection, doesn't really make a difference. It's like nothing's going to work. The freedom that we get as a consequence of the smartphone, the mobile devices. Quite fascinating, being able to control the home from, several hundred miles away, thousands of miles away, wherever you are on the planet, be able to turn the heat up, turn the heat down, monitor situations. It's quite fascinating. One of the things that we've seen over the last 18 months is digital adoption at scale. Whether you're in financial services, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in education, whether you're in government, it doesn't really matter what industry you're in. Everybody now understands something that, our CEO and founder, Eric Yuan, built Zoom around, which is that video is the new voice. People now get it. Now, not everything needs to be, quote, on video. If you're making a dinner reservation, you don't need to see the reservation agent. It's like we're doing, an insurance claim because we had a water leak in our basement. And, wouldn't it be great if the insurance agent was able to say, well, can you just show it, show me the damage over the phone? Instead, here we are, sort of like 3 phone calls later, and now they're dispatching an engineer who has to drive here to my house to sort of take some pictures. They could have done this, by me just turning the camera on my smartphone app during a conversation, and life would have been good. So when you look at things like artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, machine learning, etc., we're only scratching the surface of what these things are going to enable us to do across every industry in the world.
I think that's an excellent point, and something I was going to say, which is, I think it was interesting to see some companies that sort of were digital already and just sort of enhance the digital experience, right? I think we got greater traction around mobile payments, even though that previously existed. But there are absolutely sectors that did a great job during the pandemic in terms of digitizing the experience. And I'd sort of point to doctors' visits in the telehealth space. But frankly, there are a number of other sectors that might be slightly lagging and have an opportunity to really leverage the capabilities that are available in order to streamline and just evolve the services that they deliver. And I think technology is going to be the force for that. And we need more sectors to continue to sort of adopt that technology and continue to move that forward again for the consumer and to, to create some of that equity kind of across the globe.
So, just thinking about what both of you said, and I want to dig in deeper, specifically in those areas. Harry, you talked about digital adoption at scale. And Jana, you talked about the digital experience and the digital services as a whole. So thinking about a digital service like Zoom, it's been so essential to many of us as individuals, as businesses and industries as a whole. In your mind, Harry, how is Zoom helping enable that digital adoption, digital transformation across industries? And what can business leaders do to really leverage these capabilities for their own organizations?
It all goes back to sort of one of the core principles that Zoom was founded on, which was ease of use. There's a phrase that people use when they talk about Zoom. It just works. No hesitation, no friction. You click the link, you're in the meeting, boom, boom. It's kind of like, I have zero hesitation and no panic attacks about ever joining a meeting. If it's at 10 o'clock, I don't need to join at 5 to 10. I can join at 10. Why? Because I know when I click that link, I will be in that meeting in 3 seconds or less every time. That takes away a lot of the fear factor. Incredible reliability was the second principle that Zoom was founded on. And while we went through incredible growth, we went from 10 million daily meeting participants in December of 19 to over 300 million daily meeting participants in April of last year. We maintained our service levels. I think, which is testimony to the differentiation of our technology architecture, quite honestly. And it's things like that. It's ease of use and incredible reliability. If it's hard to use, or it's kind of like lumpy, works sometimes, doesn't work with quality all the time. I remember in my prior lives using different solutions. We turn the video off because, it's like you really want to have the audio, but if the bandwidth is getting sucked up by the video, then I'll turn the video off. So at least I can have the audio conversation. But when you have frequent experience of audio and video and content sharing with quality, with reliability, you leave it on. leaders are also seeing the value because they are experiencing this in their personal lives. In the height of the pandemic, they were doing dinner parties on Zoom on Saturday night from their homes, having cocktail parties with family and friends around the world. And, fortunately for Zoom, it's like they would be back at work on Monday morning and saying, I've experienced Zoom here, I've experienced Zoom there. It's like the reliability, the ease of use, the quality, etc. Why aren't we doing this here? Why aren't we doing this in my company? Jana, I'm sure you have a perspective on this. It's all about the employee experience. If the employee can have a great experience at work, what do you get? You get loyalty, you get commitment, you get productivity, you get employees that are enthusiastic. Why? Because when you can have a great experience at work, it allows you to become incredibly successful. And, and as an employee, what do you want? You want to be successful. You want to grow your career. You want to make contributions to your company. And so leaders, have seen that and realized that and are supporting that sort of momentum, if you will.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, Deloitte as a firm has been really committed to well-being. It's something that I'm really passionate about. But to be totally honest, right, until the pandemic, it was hard for people to make tough choices relative to a hybrid environment, right? We assumed our clients would want to see us 5 days a week, 4 days a week to fly in and to be, in their locations. And that if we didn't do that, we weren't going to have the same relationships, or frankly, that our people weren't going to feel as connected when they were sort of sitting in a room. And we've sort of proven that wrong. I think our people feel grateful to be enabled to have connectivity to their team, but to also, to your point, have breakfast with their kids and be able to take a walk during the day, if they need to do that. And so again, this experience has enabled leaders, I think, to get more comfortable with not having people sort of sitting all together 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, and really empower employees, right, to be able to work and engage with one another in different ways. And we're still seeing the same productivity that we would have expected and higher, because we don't have people sitting in cars and sitting on planes, and they're able to spend that excess time either taking care of themselves, engaging with one another, developing one another in a way that we couldn't have experienced before. So I think it absolutely is going to contribute to the future of the relationship between an employer and employee. And to your point, Harry, what I'm really excited about is the diversity that it's supporting relative to the people I will be able to put on my teams, right? Historically, I sit here, in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. I was pretty limited in terms of the people that I could have physically show up to my clients. And now tapping into the nation and the world, I'm working really closely with my Irish colleagues, because at this point in time, right, it doesn't necessarily matter where you are, and they've got great capabilities, and it actually enables us to work around the clock, if you will, given the time zone. So there's tremendous advantage. And I think that leaders really need to model that and to lean into it and to create engagement with their teams and harness the power of that technology.
And just to circle back on something, Hanish, you said a moment ago, which was, if there is a silver lining to COVID-19, it's clearly accelerated the trajectory that we were already on. The question is that, a 3-year, 5-year, or 10-year trajectory, I think it's probably different in different industries, but it certainly accelerated where we were going.
I want to stick with that train of thought, and where you guys talked about that employee experience. And Harry, as you've just mentioned, that acceleration. Now, certainly improving that employee experience and makes generally employees feel more optimistic about the path ahead, and certainly for consumers. So with that optimism and looking forward, how might this impact, one, digital behaviors as a whole, and two, the next wave of innovations? What do they look like as we look forward?
As Harry and I have both said a number of times, I think there is an acceleration relative to the adoption of digital behaviors, things that people didn't contemplate before, as we talked about, going to a doctor visit through Zoom. that didn't feel necessarily to people a couple of years ago that would be a good experience. And yet we have the data to support that people were highly satisfied with that experience, and frankly enabled people to continue to getting the healthcare that they needed at a time where they couldn't get it in person. And so I think there is real data to show that technology has really evolved and advanced, different parts of the sector, and that we have we as consumers, even despite sort of the stress of being in a pandemic, we're able to adopt those. We'll look for that in the future. I think people who experienced telehealth and thought that it was, had a satisfactory experience, they will continue to expect that and expect an even better experience. They'll expect some ability to somehow remotely track their vitals and provide that information. If that was sort of maybe perhaps something that was lacking in the initial post-pandemic visit, I think there's going to be an expectation to build on that. So I think the innovation is going to come from consumers who are demanding, right, that convenience, that efficiency, and things that aren't as impactful on their day-to-day life, and the digital nature of that, right? People don't want to go into places and sign papers and have to show up or wait for, the repairman. If we have, when we have 5G, we have connected devices in our home, repairs could happen virtually, right? I mean, your refrigerator, perhaps, Harry, could be, repaired remotely. And so I think the consumers will continue to drive that. What we need is the sectors to sort of continue to really focus and evolve and, again, embrace the technology that's going to enable them to transform their business. But I think consumers are really going to lead the way here.
In a few weeks, I'm going whitewater rafting with my daughter, and part of the gear we need is waterproof clothing. And it's like, yes, I can go to a bunch of different outdoor stores and I can look, a myriad of sort of different clothing from different manufacturers, but it's very hard to sort of find somebody who can give you the details. So I was looking at a particular brand on the weekend, and they're willing to engage me, over video to talk about their brand and talk about their articles and talk about what I'm doing and give me advice on what what we should consider. And it was a fantastic experience, and so much better than having to go to a physical store. I was sitting in the family room and and engage.
Well, and more efficient and cost effective for them as a company, right? Than to have, salespeople standing on the floor if they're, idle at times, right? I think and they don't need everybody to have that specialization, right? There's only a certain number of people. And then, you add contactless checkout and you're sort of in business, right?
I mean, I was right. The person could have sold me the merchandise over the phone. And it's like, talking to one of our retail clients, they saw the e-commerce business sort of, go straight up like a rocket ship. People are, sort of got really used to the e-commerce experience where people are doing e-commerce like who never did it before.
Right.
To go back to the digital device topic for a moment, the things that we can do on our digital device today, that as little as a year ago, we couldn't.
Right.
As I started working from home, I was cleaning up my office and I came across this cartoon. The cartoon is this person, and they're looking at a device strapped on their wrist. And the person is saying, hang on a sec, the data's coming to my watch right now. Okay, here it is. And, this person is standing with a bunch of other colleagues, and this big, sort of mainframe computer is behind them. And that cartoon was November the 5th, 1990.
Wow.
Think about that. 1990. Yeah. I mean, that shows you how old I am as well. So anyway, but putting that aside, that was like 31 years ago. It was a joke back then.
Right.
Today, it's a reality. Mm-hmm. So many things are realities today that just, again, some time back, not possible.
Right. And not only a reality, but if I think about my 14-year-old son, he doesn't know any different. I literally asked him, we were in a hotel and I asked him to call and he didn't know how to use the phone because he doesn't need to. He has everything on a smartphone. He only takes his smartphone places. He doesn't take anything else with him because of mobile payments and because he can engage with me. And so we not only have the reality for folks like Harry and I who have seen both worlds, we have generations now that have not seen, the analog version of many of these things. And therefore they will be driving a lot of the demand for this innovation. They'll be like, why should I have to sign anything? I've got, Face ID or whatever. They're going to want those things, and they're going to push, industry sectors out of their comfort zone for sure.
Yeah, clearly.
As someone who's got an absolute thirst for what the art of the possible is and what the future looks like, I could have you guys on for 2, 3, 4 episodes talking about this, and I just would not get bored at all. But I have to be fair on your time, and I want to ask you just generally any kind of final thoughts as we look at as what you guys described, overnight, the need for connectivity, the need for all these devices, these digital services, and certainly, Harry, as your company enables so much of the world to be connected when we were so disconnected, so to speak, or forced disconnection. Any final thoughts on that as a whole from a connectivity and device perspective?
Yeah, super excited about the future, quite honestly. I think that it's becoming a even more connected world today than what it was. Very excited about sort of embracing the hybrid world, helping companies around the planet, governments, educational institutions, sort of leverage the hybrid technologies in the hybrid world, and making the world, just generally speaking, a better place for all of us. My fundamental belief, and I'm sure, Jana, you'd agree with me, which is that I think a lot of people have learned a lot of things over the last 18 months. It's been a very humbling experience. And I think that sort of generally speaking, I find that people are sort of calmer, more respectful, more inclusive. I just hope that we keep all of this. We don't lose it. We don't go back to where we came from. It wasn't bad. It wasn't terrible. I just feel like this is better from a human perspective. That's my number one hope, is that we continue to embrace this, embrace what we like and what's working well, and identify those things that, need to be honed, need to be improved upon. But let's not sort of pivot back to how things used to be.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I couldn't agree more. I think we've proven that, some of the assumptions that we had about the way things work, aren't accurate, and to be able to continue to advance along those things and take the good of what technology has to offer, right? And how it can actually improve our lives and continue along that journey, I think is going to be so important. And, as Harry, you mentioned, similarly, I was on planes all the time, like you and I alone, right? Our schedules have made a tremendous impact from an environmental perspective, with the reduction of travel and things like that. So how can we be more mindful about advancing, I think, ideals that many of us have relative to the environment, relative to inclusion, and how does technology play a role in all of that? What will be interesting is that there is still a need for human connection, and that will absolutely happen. But I actually am finding greater connection also through technology, right? In terms of engaging with people that don't live near me more often through video, which is a different experience than it had been in the past. So couldn't agree with Harry more. Let's take the goodness of what we found through the pandemic and then really continue to push sectors to evolve and leverage that technology to enhance the human experience.
Brilliant. I mean, normally I'd close with a pithy statement or a summarization, but I can't top what both of you have just said about just taking the positive, taking the goodness of what we've experienced. So with that, I want to thank the both of you, Harry, Jana, for joining me on the pod today. And for our listeners, until next time, happy listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hanish.
Thanks for listening to User Friendly. To subscribe or listen to more episodes, search for Deloitte User Friendly in your favorite podcatcher or find us online at userfriendly.deloitte.com. If you like what you hear, please rate us on Apple Podcasts and leave a review. The opinions expressed by guests on this podcast belong to them and do not necessarily reflect those of Deloitte. This podcast should not be deemed or construed to be for the purposes of soliciting business for any of the companies mentioned, nor does Deloitte advocate or endorse the services or products provided by these companies.